Right. Good morning. Morning. How are y'all doing? I was volunteer to come to you, but I don't know if my hip can handle it. Oh, no. That's after my hip was surgery. 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Oh,
Hi, Larry.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Charlie Weeks. I'm the Director of Client Success with Essential Education, excuse me. Hope you're here ready to learn a little bit more about Essential Education. Our trainer, Laura Shee, will be joining us in just a minute. Looks like we've got a good group here. I see some people introducing themselves in the chat. That would be great. We'd love to know your name and where you teach. And then while we have a few minutes before Laura joins us with the presentation, I'd love if anyone has any specific questions or things that they, for sure want to get answered during this session, please put those in the chat and we can definitely try to get those answered for you during this session, whether it's during the presentation or at the end, but we definitely want you to leave with, your questions answered. So we would love to hear from you. And I should have had you write this as you all were introducing yourselves, but we'd also love to know how you would rate yourself with Essential Ed. Are you a brand new user? Are you, kind of intermediate? Would you say that you're kind of more advanced? I mean, you can use whatever word you want to kind of rate yourself, but we'd love to kind of know the type of group that we're talking to here, just so we can better tailor our presentation. So thank you, Karen. I see that. Thank you, Angela. It's good to know. Awesome. Very good. Well, hopefully, for those that are beginner or brand new, or maybe been hired recently in the last, 6 months to a year, I mean, we're hopefully going to give you all what you need. But for those of you that have had some experience, I think there'll be some tips and tricks and good specifics for you all as well. And it looks like Laura just jumped on. Laura, I'm going to turn it over to you. We also have AJ Kroll on in the presentation as well. AJ, do you want to say hi?
Morning, everybody. Thanks for having us here. Hope your conference has been awesome. We're glad to spend this time with you today.
Yeah, thank you. All right, Laura, we're going to turn it over to you if that's okay. And just so you know, Laura, while we were on and we were asking them to go ahead and introduce themselves and to put any questions in the chat. And they've also been rating themselves if they're brand new beginner, if they feel like they're intermediate, they're kind of self-describing what their level of experience is. So
Perfect. And
Yep.
while you might be wondering, even sometimes the trainer struggles with virtual technology. I was having a really hard time coming off of mute. So, now that the embarrassment is over for the day. Good morning. My name is Laura. I am one of the educator support specialists here at Essential Education. So glad to be joining you for your virtual conference and providing this opportunity to just chat with you about the Essential Education online software. So here are all of the courses that you and your students would have access to. So in our HSC course group, GED or HiSET Academy, the one that they have access to should align with the tests that they will be taking. All students will automatically receive access to all 3 courses in our Job Ready group. So with Computer Essentials, bring them up to speed on digital literacy skills, Work Essentials for those soft skills, and Money Essentials on the personal finance component. And later on, I hope to inspire you with some examples on how some of these lessons can be incorporated into your academic classroom and really bridging the 2 sectors for better engagement and retention of all of these important skills. Then we have College Essentials, which is aligned to AccuPlacers, designed for students that will be that are already accepted into a 2 or 4-year degree program, and will now be taking AccuPlacer to see what level of courses they will be placing at the collegiate level. And then we have our TABE 11-12 Academy, which is designed for students that need to brush up on their basics first before they are ready and will be successful in a GED or in a HiSET class. It can also be used for students that are needing to hit a specific TABE score range as a prerequisite for any vocational or training programs of that nature. So here's just a really easy infographic for you in terms of what is the right program to choose for your adult learners that are kind of in the process of getting their high school equivalency credential. If they're coming in with a TABE score that's in the higher range of level M, then I would say they'll probably do just fine starting in our GED or HiSET Academy. You can, of course, always have them work through level D, because our GED and HiSET Academy starts at about that NRS level 4, so 5th, 6th grade level, and then we'll proceed to take them all the way through 12th. And for College Essentials, we're really focusing on kind of the 9th through 12th grade materials, the ones that will get students into those credit-bearing courses in college. So I want to share with you a little bit more about the student experience. So I'm going to get you a login page for our school. And I want to quickly talk about logging in and login troubleshooting while we are here. So when you or your students are logging in, they should see the name of your school or the name of your organization on the login page. That's a really easy way for students to know whether or not they have arrived at the correct login website. And I would say 90% of login troubles are caused by students not logging in at the correct website. And I would say the other 10 or 15% are likely coming from not using one of our recommended web browsers. So these are Chrome and Firefox on a computer, and then Chrome or Safari on mobile devices. So it would be the default application that came with their device. Now, just really quickly, thumbs up or thumbs down if you know the login page for your organization. All right, so that would be in our reactions or chats, both perfect. Lots of
I'm
thumbs
seeing
up.
thumbs up.
I also see a laugh out loud until you cry face. So that's very interesting.
Yeah.
If there's a story behind that, please let me know what that is.
Yeah, awesome. It looks like people know their login. That's great.
Excellent. All right, so when I click on the login button, and for your students, when they log in on any new device, it will ask, are you studying at school during a class? The yes and no selection here will be impactful to how study time information is displayed, but not how it's recorded. So here we're at a virtual conference, so probably not in a classroom, so I will select no. And then for purposes of classroom instruction, if you want to make sure, right, that the study time information is being captured and displayed in the correct way at the beginning of your direct instruction sessions, your classroom sessions, and you want to incorporate essential education into that class, we have a toggle. It's right next to help and support, which is highlighted in orange, and students can access this button at any point in their homeroom experience, and simply just let them know at the beginning of your classroom instruction session to make sure that this says yes and that it's marked in orange. And then at the end of your class session, have them all click on this, and now it's displaying no in a grayed out fashion. So now when they continue and study on their own after class, those hours will be properly displayed in your study time report. All right, and there should be lots of experience with our GED and HiSET academies. I specifically want to give you a view of our job ready courses. So with Computer Essentials, we have these 3 sections. They are aligned to the IC3 exams, which is a nationally recognized digital literacy credential. And then with students, right, we'll want them definitely working through computing fundamentals. They'll learn skills here that are key for taking the computerized GED or HiSET exams. So things like how to navigate on a computer, keyboarding. Those are 2 key ones that I can think of that will be helpful for students. Key applications and information. This specifically addresses applications or programs students might be using through the course of their job or their career. So think Word, presentation, so PowerPoint and spreadsheet. And then living online is a unit or is a section that I've actually gone through, and it really talks about how to protect privacy in the online environment and then professionalism. So here's a great question about a test out quiz. So if a student decides, hey, I know this information, I want to try and test out and just move on to the next unit, they have 1 attempt and they have to submit the quiz on their first attempt in order to get the score to count towards whether or not they will move smoothly onto the next unit. And the default test out quiz score for moving on to the next unit is 80%. If you have school administrator level access, you can set that higher or lower depending on how you want students to master. All right, so I hope that answered your question. And then with Work Essentials, we are covering, so there are currently 6 modules, and we are adding to our Work Essentials course. This is one of the 2 Work and Money Essentials, where it allows students to freely move about their various modules and really pick and choose the lessons that's going to be the most impactful for where they are, right? If they're in the job seeking stage, they're probably going to be focusing on finding a job and making a good impression, but they're currently working. Maybe they're wanting to get a raise or wanting to get that promotion, then most likely they will be focusing on solving problems, working with others, communication, and professionalism. At the end of every module, there is a quiz, and when students have completed every module, they will be able to take a final assessment and really allow you and allow them to get a sense of how well they've mastered the materials. Same with Money Essentials, right? We're talking about budgeting to loans to goals, and finally talking about credit. So students, wherever they are in their personal finance or planning journey, they can pick a specific lesson that's going to be the most helpful. So as an example, 2 years ago, while buying a car, I went in and looked at the car loans unit, and I felt empowered walking into a dealership. So those are the courses that we offer in the Job Ready group. There is a certificate of completion at the end when students take their final assessment. And then in Computer Essentials, there are certificates of achievements as well. And that's going to be based on how well they score in these individual modules on their practice test. So these are great information for students to add into their portfolio and really just bolster, right, the impression that they will make to their current or to a potential employer. Any questions about the Job Ready courses? So what are the free coaching sessions about? Great question. So here on our Essential Education team, we have a student success coach, and she hosts 2 webinars. So Tuesdays and Wednesdays is when she hosts her webinars, and there are 3 sessions on the same topic. And it just covers things like general information about the high school equivalency exams, study tips for various subject areas, and then connecting some of those academic skills to career-related fields. So those are coaching sessions, and you can make them available to your students, or if you find a topic that's specifically helpful, you can relay that information and really encourage students to register for those coaching sessions and maybe give them extra credit for attending sort of like an extra webinar, something that's outside of the standard curriculum of your class. And here's just an example of a learning plan that I created. This specifically is designed for job seekers, and it pulls lessons from Computer Essentials, Work Essentials, as well as reading, language, and writing lessons from TABE, as well as HiSET or GED academies. So just as a way where you can really bridge academic skills with career-focused or job-ready skills. Okay. So sound is going in and out. Got it. So I'll move my mic a little bit closer and speak a little bit louder. So hopefully that will improve the sound quality. There are also lots of people on this line, which I'm super happy about. But that can potentially impact the sound quality as well. And for my math teachers out there, if you can think of ways to incorporate some of those Money Essentials or Computer and work essential lessons into an academic learning plan, please type those comments and those ideas into our chat window. So I haven't explored that one very much in depth, but certainly with loans, we can calculate interest rate. I think. All right, so okay. All right, so I talked about some login steps already. Okay. All right. So one of the new features that we've implemented on our login page is that even if you don't have the correct login website, so this is a quality of life improvement, if you have the right username and password combination, it will direct you to the correct login page. And here's a lesser known feature, but if, right, you or one of your students forget the password, if we have the email address with a username on file, specifically email address, because then we'll then send them login instructions or reset instructions to get a new password. And so that's one of the reasons why we encourage, when you're setting up new student accounts, to go ahead and put in that student's email address so they can use the forgot password link on their own, rather than reaching out to you and constantly interrupting your workflow just to reset their password. But that is something you can do for your students. And the main issue would be here if they're getting a message that says, oops, we're not able to, based on the email address they're typing in or potentially a username, being able to locate their account. In which case, we'll definitely have to go into one of our login troubleshooting steps, and that is to check for the spelling. Typos do happen, whether that's in the email address or username and or the password that students are typing in. So there is the website, whatismybrowser.com, to make sure students are following the recommended technology. I've gotten frustrated asking students what browser they're using. So it's much easier being able to refer to them to a specific website that locates that information and will give students step-by-step instructions on how to update their browser on their specific device. So then I don't have to be the technology expert for the wide variety of different devices and browser applications that are out there. Checking spelling. So if you would go ahead and attempt to log in as the student, and that will give you lots of information on why the student might be having some trouble and whether or not typo or maybe caps lock being on is the reason why they're not being able to log in. And finally, there's a much easier way to check for the login page the student is on, because it is displayed on the login page itself. All right, so thumbs up if you have created accounts for your students. Excellent. Awesome. All right, in that case, what I will do is focus on a couple of other tidbits in terms of managing your students. So let's go ahead and do that. So here I am logged in as an administrator, but you should have the same access to managing student profiles in your teacher accounts. So my recommendation, if you're looking for a specific student profile, is to search as broadly as possible. So maybe that's just typing in a couple of characters of either that student's first name or last name. And I might even change this active dropdown from yes to all. So it's going to look through all of the student records and finding that specific student profile. And once you locate the account, I'm going to click on the word edit. And that's going to take me to this edit student profile page. So now I have a lot of options. I did mention you can update your student's password if you like, and that's through the change account password box. But most importantly, common questions that I get from teachers would be resetting courses. That's actually done from edit student profile. So if your student started their initial practice test, but for whatever reason, right? Technology failure, life interrupting, and it's now been submitted without them making, their full true effort, and they want to have a redo. That's where you will go into the specific academy settings and reset that course. And now when you confirm, they will go back. And it's like that practice test attempt was scrapped, and they'll have a new attempt at taking that initial practice test. This is where you can also decide for your student, right, whether or not you want them to only take that practice test so you get the baseline score, or you still want them to sort of choose on their own. And from all of the practice tests that I have seen, students tend to do really well on RLA language, which in HiSET Academy, this will be writing part 1. So maybe this is an area where encourage your students to start with that practice test, and ideally getting that better than expected score will help give them a confidence and a motivational boost. Whereas students tend to struggle more on the math practice test. And definitely we don't want students to experience a test that in their opinion, right, they're not quite ready for, and it's extremely difficult. And now they've lost all of their confidence and they're just throwing their hands up in defeat and not even willing to move forward in studying and acquiring the skills that they need. So here's a question on what is the difference between the practice test and the self-assessment. So in GED and HiSET academies, as well as Computer Essentials, the practice test is a half-length test that's asking students essentially the questions similar to what they will see on an official exam. And when they're done, what they will receive is a predictor score that lets them know, hey, if you were to take that official test today, this is likely how well you will score on that test. So it can be very useful, again, in establishing the baseline for a student, and then it will do a better job in creating a refined learning plan because we have more questions and more data to curate a learning plan specific to the learning needs of that individual student. Self-assessment, on the other hand, it's short, it's easier, and it's typically designed for lower level students, students who are not very confident about becoming a learner or about that subject area. It's still a way for us to quickly gauge what they need to learn and make some customization and adjustments to the learning plan. But ultimately, it is an option for the student to either just say, nope, start me with the broadest learning plan available, or okay, I'm feeling my way through. It's not very long and the questions are not very difficult, so it's not a huge, maybe not a huge blow to their confidence if they miss, they miss a lot of questions. I think Charlie had a really good example for the difference between the two. And I think his reference was like the TABE locator versus the TABE pretest. So the self-assessment is kind of like the locator, where it's short and we're kind of pinpointing, whereas the pretest is much more refined because we have more questions. So question, can the teacher choose this and not make it an option? So yes, so under the specific GED or HiSET Academy settings, you can say, well, I know my student struggles with math, so I don't want them to see how challenging the practice test would be, but they're ready, or I want to see baseline score where they might be starting from in the other subject areas. So they'll only see the practice test options for that. So now when I log in to this student profile and start RLA reading, the only option I have would be to take that practice test. Okay. So Charlie, you're on, we're wanting to hear specifically your example comparing self-assessment versus practice test. What are your thoughts? Is Charlie still on?
Charlie just popped off a few minutes ago. Sorry.
Oops. All right. Well, we'll save that question and make sure when he comes back that we get his take. But if other teachers, what are your thoughts? Do you encourage, or are you asking students to take the self-assessment or the practice test? So yeah, please type your thoughts and comments into the chat window. And AJ, since you're on, how about, what are your thoughts? Practice test versus self-assessment, what's more appropriate?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. So I similar to what you were describing earlier, if I think a student is, well, I should say from when I was an adult learning teacher, I feel as if a student is pretty close in a subject area, or even if it's a strength, I'll lean on the practice test. But if it's an area in which I know that they're struggling or they're quite deficient, I just go with the self-assessment because it's quicker, it's shorter, and they've usually just come from doing a TABE with me. So they've already spent 3 hours doing testing and they're not wanting any more of it. So, yeah, it's a case-by-case basis with the student. You really got to know your students.
And comments are coming through. I love this comment from Dawn. It depends on the level of the student. Absolutely. And then I think, AJ, you brought up a really good point too. If a student has just sat through several hours taking TABE exams, they're probably undergoing some test fatigue. In that case, you have an option when that student starts in TABE 11-12 Academy. You can place them into the level, right, corresponding to their TABE results, so that they're not having to spend yet another hour or more taking another 25 question test. And so this is an area where, again, if they're in the high range of M or D, I would start them in GED or HiSET Academy directly. And this is where, again, if they're at NRS level D, I would encourage them to take the practice test, because that's going to tell me how the skills that they have right now, how they align to what they still need to learn to pass their GED exams. So that's an area where if they're at NRS 4, I would encourage them to take the practice test. Or if they've come through TABE 11-12 Academy and they've made skill gains and level gains, I would encourage them to start with that practice test, because it's more important, I feel, as an instructor to know, okay, how do, right, your skill deck right now align to what you need in order to pass your GED or your HiSET exams. All right, so great question, awesome discussion for managing students. So again, you have the option of setting, how students start each individual subject in GED, HiSET, as well as TABE Academy and Computer Essentials. And I think ultimately, if I had to say, the one deciding factor, level would be a key deciding factor. The other key deciding factor would be, do you need to have a baseline score, like a starting point, which can be important, and you can use that to help motivate your students too, right? Each time after they do some studying, when they take another practice test and their scores go up, then that could be used as a way to motivate students in affirming to them, hey, the time that you're putting in, the effort that you're putting in, it is creating results, and you're getting closer and closer to that end goal, which is to get your credential. All right, random question, Dreamcatcher. We can talk about Dreamcatcher at the end. Okay, and then there is an inter-test scores tab. This is where, with official TABE results or their GED and HiSET results, you can go ahead and put them into this inter-test scores tab. Now, it's not going to impact their learning plan, but students will be able to see that when they click on that details link in the progress box on their homeroom, and they can see, oh, okay, when I started, say a month ago, my TABE score was here. And now, hopefully, ideally, it has improved, or hey, I've already passed these exams and I just really need to focus on maybe like math or science to get my credential. So again, it simply is another way to visually represent, kind of benchmarks for students. And if you can, right, definitely a great way to visually motivate students and help them to see if they're on the right track, right? What maybe changes they need to make to be on an accelerated path, perhaps. So those are ways that you can make changes to a student's profile. All right, and that includes their account status. So you can deactivate the student profile. So now this seat becomes open for another student in your organization. And when they return, instead of creating a new duplicate account, simply reactivate the same account, and they'll be able to see some of that information previously. Is there an information page for educators on how to utilize the menus and tabs? Great question. We will be creating that document. In the meantime, you can find that information under resources and then looking at our user guide. Okay, so before I get started, thumbs up, yes or no, on whether or not you've checked out reports and are currently running reports, and then type into your chat window on the report that you run the most often and how that's been useful. So excellent, we have had teachers with experience in our reports. Okay, and some have not. So I'll definitely give you a reports overview. And then we can focus on a couple of reports. Ooh, okay, someone running student summary report, excellent. All right, AJ, if you had to pick one report that is your favorite report, which one would it be?
Yeah. I don't, I like them all. Student summaries probably in study time are probably two that I would run the most often because it gives me like the real-time information that I need, but I don't know that they're my favorite. I love a good skill mastery report, you know.
Correct, but skill mastery report takes time to gather the information. Okay, so it looks like we have varying experiences with our reports, and that is just fine. So I will give you an overview. So reports is where diagnostic information about your students are kept. Now, especially if you have just a teacher account, what's going to be really important is organizing those students into classes first. And that's what's going to help you to stay organized because there's a lot of information available. And when you organize your students into classes or into groups, it's a really easy way to separate maybe your Monday, Wednesday morning class away from your Tuesday, Thursday class. You could be separating your GED students from your TABE students. You could be separating your career-focused students from the academic students. This could be the focus group that you're working on for math level 2. So there are lots of different ways that you can organize students into classes, and it has no bearing on how the student experiences their homeroom or how many seats the student is taking up. Just think of it as a traditional school, right? I want this room separate and be able to look at their time, their grades, their skills as a group, so I know how to best direct this group of students. So that's what classes will do. It will allow you to group that information into reports. You can communicate with them using messages as a group. And then through content maps, you can even assign lessons to work on as a group. So class is really the feature that opens up the door for all of the other wonderful features in our program. So when I go to reports, it's defaulting to study time. So this measures active engagement time of students when they're working through the online platform. So it's counting time from lessons, quizzes, as well as practice tests. I think one of the biggest misconceptions about study time, especially from students, is, oh, well, I logged in at 9 and I logged out at 10, so I should de facto earn 1 hour of study time. Well, right, just logging in doesn't mean you're actively working. So when they click onto a lesson, so we'll use GED Academy as an example, anytime when I click on start lesson, start quiz, or start practice test, at the bottom corner of my screen, it's telling me that my study time is being recorded because I'm engaged in a learning activity. And if I, open up another tab and now I'm, watching YouTube, surfing on the internet, or if I walk away from my device, after a while, our program gets smart and goes, well, it doesn't look like you're actually doing anything. So very much like Netflix or Pandora is going to ask like, hey, are you still here? And when that message pops up, student is now in idle mode and study time will stop recording when they're idle. So truly students need to be engaged. So on a computer, we're tracking cursor movement. but on smartphones and tablets without a cursor, they still need to interact with the screen, right? You need to be able to click start, click next, or scroll through a passage. So all of those count as activity that engages with the program. And that's what the program is looking for in terms of active engagement time. If our workplace connection lessons are new to you, I do encourage that you check out these lessons. There are 6 jobs for every workplace connection lesson across a variety of different career fields. So we let the students know how the academic skills are used in the workplace. So if these are the career fields that are in demand that they're wanting to go into, then they should definitely pay extra close attention through the unit that's teaching them these academic skills. Conversely, if the student isn't sure on what career field they want to go into, and you see that they've done a really good job on that unit, definitely encourage them to go back and look at that workplace connection lesson. And now we're including some career exploration into your academic class. And that could be helpful since the student is showing an aptitude for that topic or for those skills. And why not, right, turn those skills into a meaningful career. Please note that for the lessons, there's usually an average completion time, and that matters in study time because a cap is put into place after we're done recording, and that's 400% this average completion time. So really what it means for you is letting students know that if they've spent an hour working on the same lesson, it's best that they simply, click on close to exit out of the assignment. And then the same lesson is still queued up and ready to go for them in the learning plan. So they simply click on start lesson again, and then resume from where they left off. That way, if they are needing the additional time to work through a passage or work through math problems, we're not penalizing them for needing that additional time, but rather making sure all of that active engagement time is counted and will be displayed properly in study time report. And that is the default information we're showing, right? Which is engagement time. Are students spending time engaged in their learning materials? And that usually indicates, hey, are they going to stick around for the long term? Right? Are we going to retain that student? And then that's the first step towards skill acquisition and skill mastery, is spending time on the instruction, learning, and practicing. So definitely a key component for student success would be study time. So typically I would leave, just a default, this is administrator. So if I want to narrow it down to a specific class, I will then pick the class I'm looking for, select a start and an end date. So let's just look at study time for the month of September. And now when I click on see report, it should update. So I definitely have an engagement of the probably 4 or 5 students in this GED class. Only one student has logged in, and it's under an hour for the entire month of September. So I would be very, very concerned with how well the student can progress when they're not very engaged with the lesson. And definitely will be more challenging if students are also not coming to class and they're not working online. Then definitely it would be difficult for them to make good progress towards reaching their learning goal. And from here, as an instructor, it will be important for me to know, well, okay, well, Johnny did work about 40 minutes. Well, what specifically did Johnny do? And that information I will find through export details. For reporting purposes for my school level administrator or data entry support personnel, you can choose export by subject, and it will detail how much time was spent in each of the individual subject area for reporting purposes. And export daily, this is a report that I recommend. It gives a summation of the time per day. So it's like a daily attendance report, but more importantly, the information that I get would be, it will give me insight to the studying habit of my students. So here I can see, okay, a little bit on the second, and then no activity for about 2 weeks. And then here's, kind of twice in the same week. So that's definitely an improvement. I tend to think of study time the way that I view exercising, right? The more consistently that I'm doing the workouts, the better and faster I'll see the results that I want. Same with studying. So this is where I can come up with really fun leaderboards or competitions, maybe for 3 days, 4 days, 5 days in a row. Those students are going to go top of my leaderboard. Maybe for the most amount of time this week, that's a leaderboard. I can have a fun competition for the students within my class, or I might work with another instructor and have an inter-class competition and find fun ways to incentivize the student for engaging more. And it could be a combination of both in classroom instruction time as well as outside of classroom learning through the Essential Education program. And we're about just a couple days, but if it was longer, then I reach out individually to students who haven't studied in a while and just check in and see, if what types of troubles or roadblocks they're experiencing from coming to class and from learning. But definitely I feel if you are recognizing and praising positive learning habits, it will really go a long way in keeping the student motivated and engaged with their learning. So that's a really cool piece of information you can find with the Export Daily report. So again, this is a daily attendance report. And not only can you see the dates, so if you're doing, hey, here's the student who's logging in 3 days, 5 days in a week, or 3 times, 5 times in the same week. How do you read the total time on task? So it's hour followed by minute followed by second. So this would be on the 29th, 0 hours, 24 minutes, 30 seconds. All right. And then for the Export Daily, so this is a more detailed, or export details. So this is an exact breakdown of every single content item and how much time was spent engaging in those items. So here, what I'm looking at more would be engagement time. So not very much time spent looking through adding whole numbers or multiplying whole numbers. So I would be very curious to see, right, if the low engagement time is going to impact, right, that final whole numbers unit quiz. So by identifying some of these patterns, if a student is struggling, it can give me some insight as to why they're having a difficult time. So here I can see maybe mostly low engagement time, but here's, 2 separate days working through the same lesson. So that might indicate they're finding the topic challenging. But whether or not it's a student finding something challenging or low engagement time, that's 2 very different conversations I'm having with that student on how to best help them, right, stay on the right track and make good progress. So here's a great question from Elizabeth, and please type into the chat window if you have incentives for your students and what types of incentives you're having. So her example, like if they complete a certain amount of hours and assignments or quizzes, they get a reward of some sort. So please let us know if you are incentivizing students for study time and what types of incentives you're offering and if that's working. So great question. All right, and we're running short on time. So, all right, so student summary, this is sort of our version of a grade book. When students press the submit button at the end of their lessons, quizzes, and practice tests, they're essentially turning it in with the score that they received, and that will be documented in student summary. Written responses you will only see in GED or HiSET academies. This is the writing practice tests that students will take. That would be, you can find those prompts under content maps, but you can also see how students did on their essays, what they wrote, and where they can improve on their writing. Student readiness report is only available in GED and HiSET academies. In TABE, it's called practice test. In Computer Essentials, it's called assessment, but this is where all of the practice test information is being kept. So we call student readiness in GED and HiSET because that is the goal, right? Are you ready to take your official exams? And all of the practice tests are at the same level of difficulty in GED and HiSET Academy, right? Because ultimately it's determining, are you ready to take the official exam and what kind of score can we expect you to get when you are in the official testing center? Whereas in TABE, the practice tests are level specific because again, the alignment is to the level specific post-test and to give you indication on whether or not the student has made a level gain. With skill mastery, this is AJ's favorite report. This is where we give you a broader picture of the skills that students have acquired and mastered through the course of their learning journey with us. And it usually backs up the readiness information. And it's just another peace of mind for the student. Student overview, I did remember seeing one teacher utilizing this report. This gives you sort of an eagle eye view into the student homeroom experience as if you're logged in as the student. So it's very helpful if you're working with a student individually and you can get a sense of what they're seeing on their screen. So it's easy to either follow along with them or have them follow you and knowing that you're looking at the same page. It's the same information that's being presented. Learning plan. This is where you can see how our program has curated a learning plan for the student. And you can go in and make additional changes to that self-paced, self-guided learning plan that students normally would use. So if you have additional test information, maybe from GED Ready, from the official HiSET practice test, or prescriptions from DRC with their TABE exam, you can use that information and further customize that student's learning plan. and really tailor it to the learning needs of that individual student. So I do remember some teachers saying they've used student summary. This is definitely one that I recommend that you run, you know, on a regular weekly or every other week, because this will give you score information. So you can catch when students are sort of starting to find things being difficult. And also, what I do know is if the quiz scores do not match with the lesson or with the practice test score, usually you can find out through student summary how or why that might be. So my students are all doing well. First attempt, 100%. I am totally superbly happy with that. But you can utilize this information and focus on areas where students didn't score very well, especially on their lessons. So now you have some information on where to devote your time and energy on the topics that you knew students struggled or found challenging. Okay, is the learning plan formulated from the self-assessment data? Yes. So that initial practice test, so whether it's a self-assessment or the practice test, both of them have the ability to inform learning plan. And you can check that information. So great question. All right, and with the limited amount of time that I do have, I do want to point you to our resources tab. I referred to it earlier. This is where you will find more shorter topic specific tutorial videos that you can access at any time. I mentioned the user guide to give you some basic information. There is some navigation information that I believe someone asked about. And then we have a student quick start guide. It's a one-page document that you can give to a student, and it can help with some of that orientation information. So I'll open up the floor for just general questions. If you want more details on a specific report, do let me know. So for Dreamcatcher, that is our career exploration and planning course. It's in collaboration. Oh, and from Tokara, please complete the presentation survey. Perfect, the link is in the chat window. But Dreamcatcher is a way for students to really do some soul searching, self-discovery, figuring out you know, kind of their goal and their purpose in life, as well as their strengths and weaknesses, aptitudes. It links to a website that allows them to look for kind of jobs in the area, you know, the education level needed to enter into specific career fields, as well as kind of like medium income, so students can really make an informed decision on whether or not it's the right career for them, and what, you know, maybe credentials they need in order to get that dream job and be in their dream career. So that is Dreamcatcher. It's kind of the final piece in the puzzle. Oh no, thank you all for your time and for all that you do for your students. I want to say, I'm sorry, AJ, I skimmed over skill mastery.
Okay, I'm not mad about it. I think you did a great job with the reports, and honestly, some of the ones are going to be most useful to them. So, excellent.
So please don't hesitate as you explore our program more, as you're utilizing reports more with your students. If questions come up, don't hesitate to reach out to the educator support team. So you've got me, AJ, we've got Stephanie, who's probably busy with another presentation, and Jenna, Charlie, as well as Beth, right? She's also on your team, and we're here to make sure that you feel confident in utilizing our program to the best of its ability to help